Daily crypto news and analysis. It is September 25th, 2025, and we've had some pretty massive liquidation events happening, brought to you by Binance. And we know it's all apex predators. And that's the crazy thing about this pullback is there is no war, there is no event, there is no massive news that just broke, there is no exchange that went to zero. It is apex predator doing apex predator at the forefront of it all. So I thought I'd make this video and kind of keep the North Star, and look at the things that I'm going to be looking for and some targets that I have. All right, number one thing that I'm looking at is the Bitcoin seasonality average monthly performance. And we know September historically, not only for the traditional markets, but obviously for Bitcoin as well, is the worst performing month. And we had a little bit of hope that it might be different this time. We were pumping into September, but then, the markets have a way of doing what the markets need to do. Now, I don't necessarily expect October 1 that we're just going to rocket 29% to the upside. However, this is over 10 years of data. This goes to 2023, but we even know in 2024, November, Bitcoin was up 40%. And as it stands right now, we're still just ranging here in this range, holding the bottom of the support, and we're on top of the 100 moving average. So I would like to see it start to have a bounce in here and make its way back to about 114,000 to confirm this as a higher low on the daily time frame. Seeing a bit of divergence start to play out for Bitcoin, and we talked about it on a smaller time frame, but I would say this is on the 5 hour at this point, and that is a bigger deal in my opinion, where we're seeing price continue to go down as the RSI got the most oversold that it was since April 7th, but now the RSI is starting to slope upwards. This is a very encouraging sign for me that Bitcoin is going to find a bottom here soon. I'm not quite ready to put my beard stamp of approval on the matter, but I think we're getting very, very close. And ultimately, I'm looking at two major things as the North Star: the seasonality, Bitcoin finding a bottom, and then of course the Russell 2000, which is at this critical level of, we can see it's just been at this major uptrend, and we're at the 2024 all-time highs, and we're also at the 2021 all-time highs. And we talked about it yesterday. This to me is the most important thing. What this does, I think Bitcoin will do. What Bitcoin does, I think the rest of the altcoins will do. So this to me is the most important thing. And you might classify this as a rejection. I would not. Until we take out this low over here, that would be the line in the sand that we could say, okay, this is a clear rejection. So I have it in the line in the sand for me. As of right now, this is still not only holding structure here, but it's still holding the daily 20 EMA. So taking out even this candle over here, really, you'd probably look more towards 2,324 would be a strong confirmation, but right here at 2,372, that would be a mild confirmation that, hey, we've actually gotten in a rejection and this is a lower low. And in that scenario, I think that the altcoins are in more danger. Solana is in danger of hitting the $180 target. Bitcoin is in danger of going to the 103 target. Ethereum's in danger of going to the $3,500 target. So that would be the line in the sand for me. However, my bias, especially considering sentiment, is if we break out, though, Bitcoin is going to break out, Solana is going to break out, Ethereum is going to break out. So that is where we're at with it. I mean, it's really, I think, as brass tacks is that whatever the Russell does, I think the Bitcoin is going to do whatever Bitcoin is going to do. I think that Solana and Ethereum is going to do, and then all of those ecosystems as well. So the big question is, are we going to break out, or is this a rejection? This is a red day. That's not a rejection, however, because it's still holding structure. To me, line in the sand where things get a bit dicey and we have some more work to do, more consolidation, would be 2,372. If that were to get hit, I think 180 is on the table for Solana. I think 103 is on the table for Bitcoin. I think 3,700 is on the table for Ethereum. Okay. However, that's not what I think is going to happen, okay? Because this is still pretty strong structure here. Bitcoin is the most, like I said, we're getting the divergence for Bitcoin. And the same thing for Solana. Ethereum are very, very oversold on many different time frames at this point. And one thing I would look at too is the Solana market cap behaving very much the same way as the Russell, of trying to get above all-time highs. I wouldn't classify this as a rejection yet. On market cap specifically, where price, it does look like a rejection. It does look like we're getting deep into that support. On market cap, however, we can see that this is still an uptrend. We haven't made a macro lower low at this point, and we're still on lots of support over here. So I think we're going to get our answer by Friday. That is my prediction, because on Friday is a daily close, a weekly close, a bi-weekly close, a monthly close, and a quarterly close. I believe all of those at the same time. And the markets have a way of just figuring itself out right at the right time, right when we need it to do whatever it needs to do. My prediction is that the Russell is going to push. It's not going to make a lower low. And Bitcoin is going to go to the top of the range again. Ethereum is going to go to the top of the range again. Solana is going to go to the top of the range. I think October, I have no reason to believe, especially seeing what happened with September, where we even had a little bit of hope that it was different. I think October is we're going to feel that significantly. And November, I think we're going to feel it even more significantly as well. And just real quickly, I want to show you the difference of the perspective, where Solana on price is starting to look real dicey. However, on market cap, it does not. So here's the Solana market cap chart, and here is the price. Not a huge difference, but it looks like it's already deep into the support over here and starting to challenge getting into the structural breakage over here. Whereas when we look on market cap, that is not the same story. And I will hold the market cap to a higher degree of weight because to me, that is the true price. And we got pretty oversold here. Like I said, the most oversold on market cap, or even on price for that matter, since April 7th. Okay, so this is a big deal. We're very, very oversold at this time. Again, like we talked about yesterday, oversold does not mean bottom, but it is a prerequisite to bottom. I am not there just yet to put my beard stamp of approval that the bottom's in, or I will shave my beard. But I'm getting very close. And depending on my live stream this evening, how many Nana Boo Boo comments I get, I might just go ahead and put that beard stamp of approval. But all right, one thing I wanted to point out as far as the August seasonality, September, into November, the August sort of selling climax, or this wasn't the selling climax, this was the spring actually of this big bull flag, which I am not a huge patterns guy by any stretch of the imagination, but I just remember this, like, this entire time is kind of what Ethereum is dealing with a little bit, sort of like the psychological of like, you're just flirting with these all-time highs. And I'll put it on the daily. Like, here's the 2021 all-time high. You slightly break above and you're just getting rejected. And the sentiment here was one of other, like, despair. This was the more grueling and depressing from my perspective of my audience than even November of 2022, or even of, March of 2023. This was a very depressing, grueling time because we were just so close to breaking out and we just could not do it. And I have here marked September through November because of seasonality, right? And one thing that I think is important to note too is this was the spring of Wyckoff reaccumulation, and we had a dead cat bounce to the 702, and then we came in and put in a higher low. Now, if right now we're sitting at 110, I think we got to 108. If we can hold right now as a higher low, I think there's a strong argument to be made that that's what's happening, of like just this grueling sort of downtrend. You have a dead cat bounce. We went to the 618 this time, not the 702, but especially factoring in Ethereum is at that same sort of psychological, just like trying to break above, trying to break above, trying to break above, and could not. Let's see what we went to 108. I have the low right now as 108.7. If this could hold as a higher low, there is a strong argument that it's the same sort of thing at play here. Oh my God. Where you have your August low, that was your spring, dead cat bounce, and then you went back to around the 236 before putting in the higher high, and then kind of grueling your way out of here in October. Although October did have some pretty good gains. Last year, I believe it was 20-something%. Yeah, so 25%. So slightly below average, but it was still, I mean, within 4% last year even, where November slightly overperformed last year too. I think there's a strong argument to be made that that could be at what's at play here. Even like the body of this is on the 236 from this wick low down here. So we'll see. That's what I'm rooting for. That would be like very strong evidence for it playing out structurally, sentiment-wise, whereas Bitcoin is already kind of in price discovery. Ethereum is still, Solana still is battling at that psychological breakout level where Bitcoin really battled with for months of trying to bust above these all-time highs from 2021, and it could not before it finally did so violently. And I don't want to put out hopium, but seasonality is something that I very much honor. And you know, there has to be some pretty big circumstances that kind of violate it, but it's very not gospel, not the 10 Commandments, but it definitely, there's something to it. Whether it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, I don't know what the answer is, but until it doesn't work, I'm going to pay attention to it. This is getting to be very high conviction for me. I'm looking for data points to argue against myself is what I'm looking for. And so my base case here is right now on the 5-hour chart, we are extremely oversold. Not kind of, we are extremely oversold. Okay. And most of the time that meant that the bottom was in and we went out of there. There are a few scenarios where the bottom was not in, where we would eventually go on to go and make a new low. And I'm going to talk about those. But each one of those has a commonality. So this is all the way back to November of 2022. So as you can see, very oversold on the 5-hour RSI. And we went slightly lower. So this was 15,637. We went like maybe at 1% lower over here November 22nd. But before then, and then one thing that you'll see too, there was a rally, right? So there was a rally before we got to there of 9%. So there was a 9% rally before we went 1% lower, before that ultimately being the bottom. The next time that we got this oversold was the March. This was the Silicon Valley Bank going to zero. That was the bottom. We didn't go lower. The one that is intriguing to me is the war in Israel kicking off, because we did technically go lower here. And again, I'm trying to really, this to me is like an accumulation where Wyckoff, you get selling climax, secondary test technically goes lower. And then even if you get a spring, that technically goes lower too, but it's still a bottoming structure. Okay. So I'm just looking for scenarios where we technically would go on to go lower, how long it was, but what did we do before then? So this one was probably the most oversold. This was all the way down to 2 on the RSI. This was one of the reasons I was really, really bullish back then, because this was a strong divergence that was at play here. So we ended up going, this was 129 5-hour days. So this is 25 days later. So you could almost say that this is the local 28-day bottom, 25 days. We ended up going 2.6% lower. But again, the thing that happened before that was we had an immediate rally of 4%. And within 12 days, we had a rally of 10% as well, before eventually making a lower low, which was the lowest point that we've been ever since then. This was the big sell-off after the Bitcoin ETFs got approved. We got very oversold. Nothing really to see here because this was just the bottom. All right, now this was a more long, dragged out, sort of making lower lows. You could perhaps classify this as extreme oversold, although we are lower right now than what we were here. We did go on to go lower multiple times here. But again, I think it's important to note what I'm about to show you. So this was 5% here, and this was 7% from there. This also took us, how many days did this take before we made a new low? I think that's important. This was 65 days before a new low came in. But again, the thing that happened before that happened was an immediate rally. So immediately, 18 days, 26% to the upside. Same thing here. We got extremely oversold, and immediately, even this one, like if I zoom in here, this is a good example as well. This is maybe the most compelling that made me think, what is the worst case scenario here? This was probably the worst case scenario that I was able to find, and we were extremely oversold, and then we did go 8% lower in a matter of 10 days. But again, before that happened, there was a pretty significant rally, 8%. So the lowest rally that I've been able to find is an 8% rally. This one went 8% lower. From here, again, same thing, oversold here. We wind up going lower, but before we went lower, when we got this extreme oversold, we had a 29% rally. And the circumstances of this too are a little bit different that we're analyzing, even though it's showing a strong case that at least a micro 2-week bottom, because the quickest I think I've seen is 12 days, is in before going on an 8% rally. That was the worst that I saw, worst performing one, and that was here. This also, to keep in mind, was the time when Bitcoin was trying to fight with all-time highs. So there you go. That's and then the April crash, same thing. We ended up going lower. This was 2.5% lower, I believe. 4% lower from the selling climax to the spring when it was oversold over here. But again, same thing here. Immediately before even going lower, it was a 22% rally in 3 days before eventually taking out those lows. How many days? 39 days later. So this was the local 30-day bottom when we got oversold. We did eventually go on lower. However, not before a 22% rally. Same thing as here as well. This wasn't even oversold. Well, actually, how many days is this? 10 days. Okay, so that's a lie. But we did a 22% rally. 10 days later, technically lower. But then again, same thing, 15% rally before going lower as well. So there's strong evidence to say 10 days is the smallest time frame that I've seen so far before making a new low. But the smallest percentage has been 8% off of those lows. And again, we're very oversold at this point. So I think I'm willing to put my stamp on it. I don't know about a 28-day low. I think I have strong convictions in a 28-day low, but I would say at least a 10-day low looks to be in here.